Welcome to this tutorial on programming in C Sharp. So in this tutorial we will be seeing about how we can develop a WCF service or write a web application or Windows desktop application using C Sharp coding. Okay, so this is again going to be a series of tutorial, and this is my first tutorial on programming in C Sharp. And in this tutorial we will be seeing about the .NET framework. What is a .NET framework? Okay, and what are the components within a .NET framework, or we can also say it as the architecture of a .NET framework. And then we will see about CLR, which is the main engine of a .NET framework, and the other components that are within the CLR, like the CLS and common type systems, CTS. Okay, so to start with, I will put a question, which is a very common question: what is .NET framework? Okay, so this can be a very common question in interview, like if you're going for a .NET interview, then you can expect this question: what is a .NET framework? Okay, so what is basically a .NET framework is a platform. So I will say a .NET framework, okay, is a platform, okay, which can be used for developing, okay, deploying, building applications. Okay, so it can be used. .NET framework serves as a platform for developing, building and deploying applications. So what applications? It can be either a Windows application, okay, like your WPF application or WinForms application, or it can be a web application like your ASP.NET web form application, or it can be a ASP.NET MVC application, and then it can be a web service application or a WCF service application. Okay, so your .NET framework acts as a platform for developing, building and deploying Windows applications, web applications, or it can be a web services, or it can be a WCF services. Okay, so having said that it is a platform, now what does your .NET framework contain? What are the major components within your .NET framework? So the major components within a .NET framework are libraries, utilities and then compilers. Okay, so these are the major components of your .NET framework. Okay, so now I will go for the next one, the architecture of a .NET framework. Okay, so whenever we see about .NET framework, the architecture plays a vital role in .NET framework concepts. Okay, so for explaining the architecture, I will just take a scenario. Say we have a developer here. Okay, so the developer is trying to develop a calculator application. So I have a calculator application, and the developer is planning to create a calculator application. So to start with, the developer can choose any of the programming language. The developer can go for C Sharp, or he can go for VB.NET, or it can be F Sharp, or it can be VC++, and so on. So the developer can choose any one of the language. It can be C Sharp, VB.NET, F Sharp, VC++, or any language. Okay, so once the developer has created the application, this application goes through a compiler. Okay, so if it can be a C Sharp application, VB.NET, or F Sharp by VC++, it goes through a compiler, and then once it goes through a compiler, then you get the IL. Okay, so IL we term it as intermediate language. Okay, so we define IL as an intermediate language. Okay, so later I will explain to you what is an intermediate language, okay, and why we need a IL. So basically now you just have to remember C Sharp goes to a compiler and then you get a IL. This intermediate language now runs to the CLR. Okay, so here is where your main engine comes to roll. Your CLR can be called as an engine for your .NET framework. It is a main engine for your .NET framework. Okay, so once it runs through the CLR, then the CLR places the code on the JIT. You have the just-in-time compiler. This JIT converts your IL or the half compiled source code into a machine language which can be understood by the OS, and then you get the exe. Okay, so this is a basic working or architecture of your .NET framework. Okay, so the user or the developer can go for any one of the programming language. It can be C#, VB.NET, or F# or VC++. And then once a user creates a language application using any one of the language, it gets compiled with that particular compiler. Say for C#, it goes through the CSC compiler, C# compiler. Okay, so if it is going to be VB.NET, it goes through the VB compiler. Okay, so similarly for F# and VC++. Then once it goes through compiler, then you will get the intermediate language, which is a half compiled source code. Okay, so and then from the intermediate language, your code is placed inside the CLR. The CLR places the intermediate language into the JIT, and the JIT converts the code to a machine language which is understood by every OS, and then you get the exe file. Okay, so this is the complete architecture or the working of a .NET application, .NET framework. Okay, so having said that, already we saw what does your .NET framework contain. It contains libraries, it contains utilities and compilers. Okay, can you see here? You have different compilers for every programming language. Okay, so why you need different compilers? Okay, so we will take another scenario why you really need different compilers for programming in .NET. Okay, say I have a small application that I have to write. First I will start with VB.NET. Okay, so in VB.NET I will declare a variable. Say I have a string variable which I have to declare, so I will declare it as dim is string. Okay, and then I will take the value for I using I equal to console dot readline. Okay, so once I have taken the value for I, then I will declare another variable dim num as integer, and then I will define as num equal to integer dot parse of I. Okay, so something like this. I'm trying to do something like this. Okay, so the same code I can write it using a C# also. I will write it like this. Okay, if I want to code it in C#, I will start as, so for your declaration in C#, you will go as in I, sorry, int I, and then this code will be the same code, and then again for string I, so this will be string I, and then this will be the same code, and again for integer I will declare it as int I. Okay, so if you have noticed, the syntax for VB.NET is completely different when you compare with the syntax of C#. So that is the reason why you need different compilers for different languages. So your .NET basically contains different compilers. So what happens is, this VB.NET runs through the VB compiler, the C# coding runs through the C# compiler, and then you get a common language which is called as a IN, which is the intermediate language. So the source code of the VB.NET and C# is now converted to a common language. Now that common intermediate language runs through the CLR and then the JIT compiler. Okay, so that is a basic necessary or the reason why we have different compilers. Okay. So having seen that, what is a IL? Okay, what is basically a IL? I've already told you. IL is half compiled source code. Okay, and also your IL runs through the CLR, which takes the code to a JIT. Okay. So I will say IL is a half compiled source code and it is a common language that can be understood by the CLR, and then it takes it to the JIT compiler, which then compiles to a machine language. Okay. So now we will go for the next main concept in .NET framework, which is the CLR. CLR is Common Language Runtime. Okay. So what is a CLR? Say if I have a C# coding, okay, and I have a VB.NET coding. Okay. So what happens is this C# coding goes through a compiler, okay, CSC compiler, and this VB.NET coding goes through the VBC compiler. Okay, and then you get a IL. Okay, and this IL goes through a CLR. Okay, so CLR we call it as a engine. Okay, so it's called as a execution engine. Okay. So what are the other responsibilities or other tasks that a CLR does? Okay, it does memory management. Okay, and then it does garbage collection, thread management, and then it converts your IL to machine language through the JIT compiler. Okay, so there are various other tasks that your CLR can do. Okay, so the major tasks that your CLR does is memory management, garbage collection, thread management, and then it converts your IL to your machine language through the JIT compiler. Okay, so these are the basic tasks of a CLR. Now the CLR contains a CTS. Okay, we also call it as Common Type Systems, CTS. So what is the basic use or necessity of having a CTS? Say I have a VB.NET application. Okay, so it is a math library that I have in VB.NET. Okay, so I have a math library. Okay, so within the math library I have different functionalities, say add functionality, then I have a subtract functionality, and then I have a divide functionality, so many functionalities. Now I'm writing another C# coding. Okay, now this C# coding requires the functionalities or this math library to be used inside the C# coding. So how you can do it? Okay, because this is a different syntax that you follow and this is a different syntax, but if you want to use the functionalities or the libraries in a different language into your language, then you can do that using your CTS, your Common Type System. So how you can do that? Say your declaration in int here. Okay, here you declare it as dim is integer, here you define it as int. Okay, so how you can use that is using your CTS. So through the CTS, okay, you define every data type, okay, through the CTS, which is available inside the system.int.32. Okay, system.int32 APIs. Okay, so through this you have all the declaration, all the data types. So we saw about in this tutorial so far, we saw about CLR. Okay, so we saw about CTS, which is common type system. Okay, say if you want to take the library of one particular language and use it in a different language, then you can take the help of that. That is possible through CTS. Okay, now if you want to make a communication between from one language to another language, okay, is it possible? Yes, again it is possible through common CLS, common language specifications. Okay, we call it as CLS or common language specification. So how it is possible through the CLS? Okay, say so the CLS, we call it a set of rules, okay, which will allow you to have communication from one language to another language. For example, if you take C sharp, okay, if you take C sharp coding, okay, your C sharp coding, if you have a variable A and if you have another A, okay, so these two are defined as two different variables because your C sharp is case sensitive. It takes this as two different variables. Now if you have the same thing in VB.NET, you have a declaration A and A, then it is taken as one single variable because your VB.NET is not case sensitive. So in that case, how you can make a communication between two languages through the CLS. So through the CLS contains a set of rules, okay, which is supposed to be followed by all the programming languages in .NET framework. Okay, so the first rule here is you have to look into case sensitivity. Okay, variable case sensitivity, it has to be taken care, and this rule is followed in all the programming languages. Okay, so in this tutorial we saw about .NET framework. Okay, and then what is the architecture of .NET framework, and then we saw about CLR, your common language runtime, and then we saw about CTS. If you want to take the libraries of one programming language and use it in the other programming language, then it is possible through CTS. And then if you want to have a communication between one language and the other language, then it is possible using CLS. Okay, so thank you for watching this tutorial, and I will catch you up in the next tutorial. In our next tutorial we will see about the other concepts of programming in C sharp. Thank you so much.